Great, thanks, George. Appreciate that update.
Run and go grab my finger I left in the car.
Nancy Graham and Chief Hoflick, Fire Chief Hoflick are joining us now. Hello, Nancy.
Somebody must have something on in the background.
You're hearing background noise, Paul. I'm really not hearing anything.
It sounds like somebody's got a TV on with commercials.
Yeah, I hear a little something now.
Background chatter.
Yeah,
I hear it too.
let's see.
Ann, do you have control of the mute button?
Yep, and I'm doing that now. Okay, everybody's muted, but me, sorry. Sorry about that. Feels rude, but hey, I guess that's what you gotta do when you're at the controls.
And the background noise is gone now.
It's because I muted everybody. Paul just unmuted himself. Okay. Got 2 more minutes, Mr. Chairman.
I'm right with you. I got 2 minutes on my TikTok.
Good deal. Good deal.
Unfortunately, my laptop has the time in the upper left-hand corner.
That's helpful.
Yeah, well, listen, you pay for what you get.
Here comes Jerry Sizemore. Karen Sherman. Dennis Rizzo, letting in some more commissioners now. Good evening, Karen. Good evening, Dennis.
Hi, how are you, Ann?
Good, how are you?
Good.
I am muting everyone. I've been asked to do that because of some background noise, so forgive me
good.
if it's rude. Paul, I will unmute you in a second. Paul, I'm having trouble, for some reason, I'm having trouble unmuting you.
I am unmuted now.
You are unmuted. Great, thank you.
Yeah, okay. It's 7 o'clock by my TikTok.
Yes,
That
it
means
is.
We're going to call the meeting to order. I'm glad everybody is here. Welcome, everybody, to our November meeting. The first order of business is the minutes. And if there's any, are there any corrections to the minutes? I don't hear any. Well, of course, you're muted. I can't hear from you.
People can unmute themselves though, if they care
Okay.
to. So it's not like.
All right. The minutes will stand approved as presented by the secretary. And I get the easy part. I turn the meeting over to you, and
Hey, Ann, before you go, let me read the paragraph about virtual meetings.
Yes, thank you, Eric.
Okay. Here it goes. Until further notice, meetings of the Public Safety Commission will be held electronically with a majority of members participating via remote access in order to comply with the state of Illinois gubernatorial disaster proclamation. Members of the public who wish to comment as to an item on the published agenda must submit their statement or question in writing to Eric Cook. And all properly submitted statements or questions will be presented and read during the relevant portion of the meeting. Written comments may also be submitted by email to citizencomments@skokie.org, by mail to Village of Skokie, attention Eric Cook, 5127 Oakton Street, Skokie, Illinois 60077, or via the village's drop box located by the public entry to Village Hall. And I got the thing open. There are no messages at this time. So
Thank you, Eric. I'm just letting in Amy Memes-Foler from the Human Relations Commission and Alex Chaparro from the Human Relations Commission as well. So thank you. Good evening, everyone. Really pleased to have our second meeting to review the Skokie Police Department use of force policy. Tonight we have with us, I'll repeat it, although I said it before it was our official meeting time. We have 5 community representatives this evening. Allison Bauman. Allison, I hope I'm pronouncing your last name correctly. Is that correct, Bauman?
Yes, you got it.
Great.
Bachman, actually, yes.
Thank you. And Nancy Graham with District 72. George Mitchell and Jerry Sizemore with the NAACP, the local chapter. And Karen Hayes, who is with District 73.5. So welcome. Appreciate the 5 of you signing up for this evening. Couple of housekeeping notes, and just I wanted to explain a change that we're going to make to the December meeting. First, let me start with the housekeeping note first. The police department, there has been numerous emails sent to the participants. Appreciate everyone's patience. I hate to barrage everyone, but we did have a lot of information to push out, and I appreciate the work of the police department to pull together much, if not all, of what was sent to you. But I also wanted to advise that one of the programs that we had hoped to offer to the participants are just not going to be possible because of the unfortunate surge in COVID-19 cases. I had already communicated that the ride-alongs with the police officers, that we had made the difficult decision to suspend those. But Chief Baker spoke to a couple of his staff, and it was determined that really they could not, even though we thought at first that they could do the reality-based use of force training, because it was going to be more one-on-one and they were going to do it in a larger area of the police station. In the end, we decided that it probably for now is best to just put that on hold as well. So appreciate everyone's understanding with that. Again, our primary goal is to keep everyone healthy and safe. And when conditions are such, we'll look at resuming offering those activities to you again. So my apologies. I know no one who's here this evening, but I know one individual had signed up or was looking to sign up for the reality-based training. So again, hope to get that offered again in the future. The other change that I wanted to advise everyone about has to do with the December meeting. One of the 16 community groups that was invited to participate, that being Skokie United, has done the members of that group, that community group, have conducted some extensive research and work analyzing an initiative called 8 Can't Wait that lists 8 different components of an optimal use of force policy for any police department. They have a presentation that they would actually like to give to the Public Safety Commission about the 8 Can't Wait proposal and their analysis on the Skokie Police Department's use of force policy as it relates to the 8 Can't Wait tenets. So after some discussion and looking at the way the meetings, the registrations had lined up, it just so happened that there was only one individual who was already signed up for the December 16th meeting. And she was very gracious. She agreed to, I spoke with her this morning. She agreed to register for a different meeting. And we have moved the 2 representatives from the Skokie United group, Brian Williams and Lawrence Walters, They will be the only two community participants who will be speaking to the commission at the December 16th meeting. Of course, that meeting, as with all these meetings, right now we're live on YouTube and they're live on the village's cable channels. In addition, I expect that I expect in the next week, I'd hoped to do it before today, and I regret that some deadlines this week and pressing matters with the pandemic surge just precluded me from sending some information to the commission about the 8 Can't Wait initiative, but be looking for that. I hope to get it out to everyone before the holiday. So with that as a backdrop, I am going to share my screen, and I'm on my personal laptop, and boy, did I have to clean up the screen, I'm telling you. I had a lot of stuff on there. Let me see if I can go there now. I want to share. Hold on just a minute. It's going to take me a second here just to get myself set up with exactly where I want to be. Okay. I'm going to share my screen. Okay, oh, I did it. Hooray. I'm always happy when I'm able to do these things. So what I wanted to do was to show tonight's agenda. And we'll start with what's going to be our first question. I'm going to review these questions very quickly. They're on the screen. We're going to go through them in order. I'm going to try to allow about 20 minutes. I'm going to start looking at my clock here. 20 minutes for each question, at least 20 minutes, and then we'll have time for questions at the end. So with that said, we're going to start with, I'll read the questions just quickly. The first one that we'll dive into in a moment: what specific changes can be made to strengthen the Skokie Police Department use of force policy? And how do you believe those changes will impact the safety of the police, the public, and the subject of the potential use of force? Second question: what do you think police can do to reduce the likelihood of use of force? Third question: what do you think the public can do to reduce the likelihood of use of force? And then we'll open it up to questions. I'd like to express my thanks to Public Safety Commissioner Howard Rosenberg for giving, he actually sent us a draft of these questions, and we are using them. So we made a couple changes, but by and large, we're using them. So with that said, I'm going to stop sharing my screen and so that we can see everyone. And I'd like to just go ahead and dive into that first question. So again, just a reminder, this is really a listening session, and commissioners from both the Public Safety Commission and the Human Relations Commission, our purpose tonight is to listen to the community members who have kindly volunteered their time to join us this evening. So with that said, I'm going to open up the floor. Allison, Nancy, George, Jerry, Karen, please dive in. Whoever wants to start with this question, please go ahead.
Well, I spoke with Allison earlier today and we read over those questions, and I think the two of us are in agreement that the answer to all 4 of the questions, I think, lies in not only training. We would like to see more racial bias training. A lot of the training that is talked about in the policy, especially a lot of the answers to the 8 Can't Wait that was provided by Skokie Police Department, all kind of brushes on the fact that, all of the line items, ban chokeholds and strangleholds and require de-escalation, all of those things are in the policy. And there's not a lot that's in the policy that can really be argued against. I think it's a pretty basic policy, but I think when we really look at the meat of the policy, I think everything is going to come down to how well our officers are trained to begin with. I don't know if anyone has anything to add to that.
I just want to know if we're all on the same page on the defunding the police department, because I think that training involves funding the police department, and I think defunding is a bad idea. I think that having a police department that is well-funded provides for proper training, proper different programs that we can, like the racial diversity type programs, how to use weapons and things like that, basically. Is that pretty much what everybody thinks?
My understanding of defunding the police is not necessarily not providing them with adequate funds to do their job. It's, bringing in other departments, mental health specialists or, people outside of the police force to de-escalate situations before police have to get involved. That's my understanding of it.
There's
Well, I
also
think that's- go ahead.
leadership, aside from just training, we need to focus on leadership. I'll take you back to a situation several years ago where a Skokie police officer was in pursuit on Gulf Road at speeds, at high rates of speed. And his supervisor got on the line and told him to discontinue the pursuit. And that to me was an act of leadership without telling an officer beyond the training issue to stop. And I had to call the mayor and congratulate that supervisor because that was quite the thing to do. Not putting others at risk. One other thing has to do with what young people see as the authority of the police department. If you ask the average person out there, what is the symbol of authority of a policeman, they point immediately to the gun, and rather than to a badge or a commission. And that's one image that has to be changed.
And that's why I come from a mental health background. I'm a social worker, so forgive me. But that's why I feel that having a strong, well-funded training department would be beneficial. And I like that I think the CIT training is done at Skokie, but it looked like it's on hold right now due to COVID, which is unfortunate. And I wonder if there's any plans to reinstate more training programs like that.
Chief Baker, do you care to respond to that now? I'm putting you on the spot. Apologies.
No apologies necessary. The problem with the CIT training is it has to be an approved course by the Illinois Law Enforcement Training and Standards Board for its account for us. So we can't run our own in the absence of a program being offered. We can do the training, but it won't count. Where it really counts is on the street, right? And in the application, but there's still a state mandate that we have to meet. And in order to meet that, we have to take the approved course, which they're not offering right now.
Has the department looked into other training programs in addition to the CIT training? I know, I think someone in the last session mentioned SEED training, and I think some of the officers had already undergone that. But what about making that available to all of our officers?
We're actually always looking for good training that comes at a relatively good price. One of the things that we also, I think it's probably good for you to be aware of is it's not that simple to train everyone in the department. It's because we cannot get everyone in one spot at one time ever, right? Because we always have to cover the watches and the 24-hour operation. So normally when we do training, we have to meet, bring everyone together in groups of 4. So anything we do, we have to put it on 4 different times to hit everybody. just to give you an example, last week we were talking with the Anti-Defamation League about bias-based training for our officers, because they have a new program that they just recently developed. They've run the pilot program with the Chicago Police. They're ready to field it and roll it out. We are talking to them about doing that next year because it's just too late in this year to get it done. They have to finish their cycle by the end of next month, and there's no way we can get the 4 sessions in by the end of next month. So, but that's just an example of what we are doing and what we always strive to do, which is find relevant training on these topics and bring it. And we're also very limited on the time we have available for trainings, because every time we train, those officers are not on the street. We have to cover their absences, and just given the number of officers that we have, we couldn't double our training because we wouldn't be able to fulfill the obligation we have for the officers on the street, if that makes sense. We'd need more staff to do more training if we pushed it to a certain level. Does that answer your question?
Yes and no. I mean, I don't necessarily think that that's a great reason not to train. I think the challenge right now is going to be creative ways to find ways to properly train our officers for their sake and the sake of the community. Whether that means bringing on new staff, I don't know. That I don't know what budgets are or restrictions are with that, but I do think that, you know, it is an important topic to explore further for the township as a whole.
So you're saying find ways to do increase training, even given the constraints that we have. Who else has thoughts on this first question? Or commissioners, are there any, some of you are messaging me, please go ahead to ask your questions.
Well, this is Joel Reyes. It's not so much a question. Well, I do have one question for Chief Baker, maybe to talk about some of the train-the-trainer options to have our own staff train other members of the department. It comes at a lower cost, and it provides a better opportunity for officers to train on shift with someone who's trained. But before that, I would say I totally agree with the 2 aspects that we're talking about, not defunding and how leadership really plays a role in how officers respond to calls. In fact, if you were to remove, I would say increase training, if you were to remove costs for training, you're actually going to create more risk, because officers who don't experience these things on a regular basis, whether it be doing it or in training, are going to be more likely to have a problem when it comes to actually completing the task. So the more training you can do before you actually come across a problem, the more options and capable you will be to handle that. So I would agree defunding would be probably one of the worst things you could do. Increase liability, increase risk, and leadership is essential. But to the point of train the trainer, I would just throw that out there.
So I'd like to throw it back to our 5 community participants. Nancy, you've given us your insights about training, and you and Allison talked it through, and we really appreciate that. But are there any other questions, comments? Okay, if there aren't, we can go ahead and move on to the second question. And I'm sorry, I've got another reference here where I'm looking at the questions because I don't want to, I want to kind of stick with our, I don't want to have to share my screen again. What do you think the police can do to reduce the likelihood of use of force? So again, I think that's part of what we've just been talking about. But again, are there any other ideas? Karen, did you have something you wanted to say? If you're trying to speak, we can't hear you. I apologize.
Can you hear me now?
Now we can hear you. Yes, we can. Yes, we can.
So this is going back to the kind of the last thing, but still kind of relevant, I guess. I'm just wondering, like, if we were to look at a general, officer, how much of a year is spent in training? Like, how much time? I don't know if we've covered that ever. Like, we've covered what they're doing, but how much,
Chief Baker, can you respond to that, please?
I don't know if I'm going to be able to pull the right number right out of my head. It was in the initial presentation that we gave last time. There was a slide on training.
I can find that.
Yeah, the normal officer that's already out of the academy and through our basic training program that we have here at the department and is working on his own. Every quarter, they go through a minimum of 8-hour training day with the group that I talked about. And in addition to that, all officers attend other outside training as well, averaging about 3 days per officer per year. And then we also have, that doesn't include like firearms and range training. That's on top of that. And the problem that comes in is when you take, there's a large volume of mandated training that we have to meet. And when you take all that mandated training and you figure out how to best meet it and you come up with how many days, it's just, there's so much that has to get crammed into those few days that we have per year. And so we have to come up with unique ways to try to get it done. We've, over the years, tested different theories. We'll pull officers off the street for 30 minutes and run them through some training and then put them back on the street. All those, there's pros and cons to all that kind of stuff, and there's no real magic solution, unfortunately. Does that answer your question? But the exact numbers are on the initial presentation.
Yeah, I can look those up. It's helpful to think about. I think I'm just, as I'm listening to all of it, I'm considering like you mentioned, anytime we're in training, you're also having to cover the shifts of those, the people who are now in training instead of, it's a difficult dilemma.
Right. To be honest, we struggle with it. We're always trying to come up with a better way to do it so we get more out of our training investment. And it's something that we'll continue to do.
Can I ask, are we understaffed in our police department?
Well, I don't know how you would have to define the, what the, I guess the optimal staffing for our department would be. Over 5 years ago, there was a staffing study done by an outside agency that was published. The village board added positions to our department, and those are currently in place. So my answer to you, I believe, was that we feel that we are adequately staffed for street and watch operations. No department will ever give you an answer that yes, we have everybody that we want to have. We would love to have more, but I think it's adequate.
The reason I asked, if we're discussing what officers can do to strengthen our policy, I think what we should be asking is what we can do for our officers to make them successful at their jobs. And I think we've already discussed at length training, but I personally think that is the number one issue. And if we're telling our officers that we can't afford to train them properly because we can't afford to take them off the streets, I think we're setting them up for failure. And if that's the case that we're looking at, that, we don't have enough manpower to take the time to make sure our officers are trained, then how do we work on that aspect of it?
Well, just for me personally, I believe our department is trained extremely well. I do. We prioritize the training that we do to what we think is important. I think reality-based training on the application and use of force, knowledge of laws, and how to deal with people and communicate and recognize that a situation is going a certain way and, you know, kind of back your way out of that are all things we emphasize in the training that we do. And we will continue to do that. And I think that shows in our numbers on use of force and not having any issues really. But you can always do better, right? And especially in today's environment, there's things I would love to be able to, you know, work on more, like defensive tactics, suspect controls, things like that. If an officer only does it 3 times a year, it's really not adequate enough for them to be confident and comfortable. And there's things like that that I think we can improve on, that we'd love to have more time, and maybe we can come up with unique ways to find that time. If that helps.
And I don't want to suggest that our officers aren't well trained, and I think our numbers do show it's very impressive looking through. First of all of the information that you provided the committee with, it's impressive. And the fact that our officers do a very nice job of de-escalating situations. We all know that there's crime in Skokie, and the use of force numbers are not anything to be ashamed of. I think the reason a lot of us are serving on this committee is because it's important to be paying attention and making sure that, you know, our officers have everything that they need to protect the community, and that, you know, we feel good about the policies in place. So thank you.
Can I say so?
Yes, go ahead, Mitch.
You guys hear me?
Yes, you can hear you.
Oh, okay.
Mhm.
Okay. Anyway, what I like to say is that I agree with the fact about defunding the police isn't the way to go. I also agree with the chief about training. And one of the most important things about the training in law enforcement, because I've been in law enforcement 31 years now, what happens is that because the chief made this statement earlier about not being able to afford training for, because it's expensive. What's happening is, in my opinion, because I go out and I teach different departments, I'm a state employee that I have to get back to the state and teach, and I don't charge for it. And I've done that several times with evidence collection with the police department. But anyway, what I'm saying is this: as a collective group that you guys are all sitting here, there's a lot of talent and there's a lot of resources that could be brought into the police department and train these guys in the fields that you need. And the people in the community that could provide this training should be honored to teach the law enforcement officers in their own community how to deal with things without charging them an arm and a leg to do the training. And what's happening is that a police officer on the street has to be well equipped mentally, physically, and with equipment. Did I say something wrong? Oh, so anyway, what I'm saying is this: de-escalation and mutual respect are the 2 things that are important to law enforcement. Mutual respect on both sides, and de-escalation, so you don't have to take any further actions. You try to de-escalate it as fast as you can and as safe as you can without having to go further in the chain of use of force. And what I'm saying is that if everybody was willing to go out and help the police department and the fire department as far as doing training, then they'll be trained more at diversity training. But again, the cost of it is what's killing everybody. That's what I got to say.
Thanks, Mitch. Appreciate that. Mitch is one of our public safety commissioners. I'd like to interject. We are receiving a few comments on YouTube, and one of my colleagues who's able to monitor that is sending those to me. And one of them that came in about 15 minutes ago is from community member Allison Pierce Lovin. She says the Simon Wiesenthal Center has a tolerance training program for law enforcement agents that they are offering through Zoom. So Chief Baker, you might want to make a note on that. Again, it's the Simon Wiesenthal Center, and it's a tolerance training program, a Zoom-based tolerance training program for law enforcement. Any other questions, comments? Okay, if not, I'm going to just read the final question and then we'll open it up.
There was a hand up.
Yeah,
I'm so sorry. I didn't see the hand. Who's got their hand up? Let me look. I can't always see everybody.
Edie.
Oh, okay.
And Alonka does. But my questions for Chief Baker is about, and piggybacks on this whole idea of police officers and Mitch's comment about police officers' mental health. Do police officers use like an employee assisted program to help them with mental health, given the traumas that they see and work with on a daily basis? Do you know if that's something that police officers use or?
Some definitely do. We have an employee assistance program here at the village. It's available to all employees. We promote it all of the, every year through training and announcements. We also have here at the police department, which we developed 2 to 3 years ago, a very excellent, robust, solid peer support program, which is actually probably the best thing I think we've done since I've been around. And our peer support program is done a lot of work since we've put it in place behind the scenes with individual officers from, with all kinds of issues from their family to work. And that's probably where most people lean, unless it's a, big traumatic event. And we definitely have the EAP program as well. So I think it's a combination of both, Trustee.
My question was for Brian Baker as well, and congratulations on being chief, by the way, if everyone didn't know. So basically, I agree with what Mitch said, and it's about community, the community getting to know our police department, our police officers individually. I wanted to speak to the things that we've done in the police department, for instance, getting rid of the rotating beats and having the police officers specific to one beat so that the residents get to know who's actually in their area, as well as we used to have that knock. I know we can't do it now because of COVID, but that greet and meet from the police department, as well as, rotating the cop mobile around as well. So that was done by our public safety, from the Public Safety Commission, basically. But if you could speak to that.
I certainly can. Give me 3 seconds. Sorry, the cleaning crew showed up with a vacuum. So I think over the years, we've done a lot of things to engage with the community and have a good relationship with everyone that lives and works and visits here. I think over the years, we've done more and more as we've come up with ideas. Probably the biggest thing we did, as the trustee alluded to, was several years ago, we implemented the beat officer program here at the police department. So we took a total different look at how our beats are structured. If you're not familiar with what a beat is, it's the geographic area that an officer is assigned to where they patrol. So the village used to be divided into 4 squares equally, north, south, east, west, and there were 4 beats. But that's not how the workload is distributed. So we did a analysis of workload based on the geographic parts of the village and came up with 9 beats that are all different sizes. But each one is a relatively similar amount of work, if that makes sense. So you would have maybe a residential area that is bigger compared to a dense populated area, which is smaller, but the same amount of call volume. And then we used to deploy officers into those original 4 beats different every month. Every month, there'd be a different officer assigned to one of those areas. We now assign those officers for a year at a time with the total goal of them being able to establish relationships with the people in those areas, get to know them, get to know the businesses. So when they drive down the street and they see somebody, they've seen them before, or they drive down the street and see a car, they've seen that car before, or they haven't, and then they can pay attention and they can develop relationships, and those people feel comfortable talking to those officers. So we very much have pushed that. And those beat officers now go to the neighborhood watch meetings. They interact with the citizens, the business owners. They have direct access through voicemail and email. And we put it on our website. You can look up where you live and it'll tell you who your beat officer is.
I'd like to add, if I may, that the January, February edition of the Village newsletter, New Skokie, will contain an article listing with information about the beat officer program. And there are new assignments that go into effect January 1st. Is that correct? And the newsletter will feature information on the assignments and what officer is assigned to what beat, and you can figure out who your officer is based on the geography of the community. I'd like to read one other question. Bear with me a moment because I'm looking at a different screen here. One other question came in, and Chief Baker, I'm going to throw this one to you as well. It came in through YouTube. Whoops, I'm so sorry. Lost it here. There we go. Individual named Ken Daniel asks, how does the racial composition of the Skokie Police Department compare to the racial composition of Skokie?
I don't know. I don't have those numbers off the top of my head. I can certainly get them and provide them, but I don't have them right here.
Okay, yeah, I understood. And another thing I'd like to add is the information, the data that was sent to the commissions and to the community members who are participating, all the information that has been sent to everyone regarding this project so far will soon, probably within the next 10 days, be cataloged on the village website. It will be in a section, probably in the public safety. I'm not sure if it's going to be in the Public Safety Commission, probably in the Public Safety Commission page. I'll build out a new page and add a repository there. So be looking for that. That should be up, I'll say by December 1st at the latest. So all of that will be up soon, and we'll add the information that Chief Baker just agreed to provide. Okay, I'm going to read the last question.
And can I ask a question real quick?
Of course, yes.
This is for Chief Baker as well, and it's in regard to minimum manpower, having the opportunity to train. Do you, number one, do you do anticipatory hiring based on retirements? And then the second thing, I'm assuming when you did your staff study in your zone creation, you based it on obligated time for officers versus unobligated time. Do you have that number by chance of unobligated time that was built into the zones and manpower?
I do not have the unobligated time number that we're at currently. I know when they did the staffing study, it was all based on 60% of obligated time. So providing 40% of unobligated time that could be used for proactive activities by an officer. So that, does that answer your question on that?
Yes, it did. And then the anticipatory hiring for retirement.
So, currently we're under a hiring freeze by the village due to what's going on with COVID and everything else. When we do have vacancies and they are authorized and budgeted, normally we'll do a request to fill the vacancy upon their separation of the employee. We don't necessarily have an anticipatory process unless we're in a kind of a phase where we have several vacancies and we're trying to get ahead of the curve. We'll have a discussion with the village manager who's been very receptive to allowing us to make adjustments and fill when needed and justified ahead of time. but it's not an automatic process.
Thank you.
Okay, I'd like to open the floor up for anyone who has a question. Allison, Nancy, George, Jerry, Karen, this is your time to, speak to the commissioners and staff. Let us know what you think. Is there any, Jerry, did you have something you'd like to express? You do, you're not, you're muted. So I'll unmute your microphone.
Okay.
There.
Okay. Okay. Thank you. Sorry you cannot see me, but my video is not acting properly today. But I have a question. What percentage of the calls coming into the police department for assistance could possibly be taken care of by a mental health professional? Do you have any data on that? Or all of the calls that come into the police department, calls that need to be handled by the police?
We do not have that data available. Trustee Suckers actually asked and talked to me about the ability to get that data. The problem with collecting the data is the way our system is set up. You can have a domestic dispute call, or a disturbance on the street call, or a retail theft call, and they can all involve someone with mental illness. And they go down, they get classified and recorded as the separate independent things that they are. There isn't one thing currently that we use to tie them together, so we know what all the calls related to mental illness are. We have figured out a way to fix that, and we're implementing it now, and we'll gain that data as we go into the future, but we do not have it for the past, unfortunately.
Thank you.
Thanks, Jerry. Appreciate it. Any other comments, questions? Anyone can open the floor. Nancy, did you care to speak? No? Okay, commissioners, do you have any questions of our guests, of the community participants?
I do have a question.
Okay, George.
Some years ago, we had a social worker assigned to the detective division in the Skokie Police Department. I was wondering if that still is in effect, or has that been eliminated?
We still do have a social worker assigned to the investigation division, yes.
Okay.
Thanks, George.
And I have
Yes.
a question.
Sure.
Do we implement any community-centered accountability system? Do we have any programs like that, or groups that kind of oversee the department if there's use of force, or has that been considered?
There's none that I know of. I mean, I think the closest that would come to it would be the Public Safety Commission, but Chief Baker, I'm going to throw it to you as well.
Yeah, I would agree, Ann. There's nothing currently. I mean, closest would be the commission.
Interesting idea, though.
I do have one more question. I'm sorry to take up everyone's time, but
No apology. This is your time.
the neighborhood integrity ordinance, or the residential rental unit standards, what is the police department's role in that? I'm assuming that is not an ordinance created by the police department. Is there, it was brought up in our last meeting, and I find it interesting, particularly some of the verbiage, if a resident of a rental unit is found guilty of a Class A misdemeanor twice within a year, the family can be evicted from the home. And I'm wondering, is something as minimal as underage drinking, would that be considered a Class A misdemeanor? Okay, I don't know what it just seems concerning what the role of Skokie PD is in rental units.
Chief, can you take that?
Yeah, sorry.
Thank
Our
you.
role, our role is really to facilitate communication between the police department and the landlords and property standards division at the village, sharing information of incidents that occur at those addresses. And that's really it. We just help share the information. And if there is an issue with multiple incidents at a location, we share the information and help work with property standards and the landlord to address it. And it's not always through the end result of an eviction. You know what I mean?
Yeah, it's concerning though when, you know, the ordinance leaves it open that it could lead to an eviction. Can you give me an example of a Class A misdemeanor?
Sure. I mean, there's a long list, but theft is a Class A misdemeanor, right? Possession of certain amounts of drugs is a Class A misdemeanor. Battery, simple battery.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Other questions or comments?
I have another question.
Sure.
Is there any data available pertaining to the arrest and conviction by race, gender, and age?
Yes, ma'am, and that was sent out last week or 2 weeks ago. All the data on all of our arrests for the last 5 years by race and gender.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Sherry, it's really extensive data. There's a lot of different graphs and charts, so it takes a little bit to go through. But when you have a chance, if you keep, for some reason you can't find it in your emails, just let me know and I'll send you the email again. And if you have questions after you've looked it over, don't hesitate to contact me.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Can I ask another question? This is Allison.
Of course, Allison.
I was really impressed to see some of that data and that it wasn't as scary as I thought it might be. And that goes a lot to say about the Skokie Police Department. I'm proud of that. But I'm curious about how does Skokie's stats on the use of force compare to other villages or towns near us, around us? Do you all, maybe this is more to you, Chief Baker, do you all share tactics that work, tactics that aren't working? How do you communicate that amongst each other?
To answer your first part, we don't know, to be honest, we don't know how we compare to anybody, because unfortunately there's no standard across the country on how to measure and record use of force by police. That's one of the things the federal government is working on. They launched a new program to capture some of that, but it's only at the most severe forms of use of force that they've issued criteria on how to categorize it and collect it. The lower forms is not being collected. And how we define what a use of force is, it could be totally different than what Niles does and Lincolnwood does and everyone around us. You can't really compare because you don't know, you're not comparing the same thing. So unfortunately, there's no answer to that that I can give you. The second part of your question was, do we share tactics? We absolutely share tactics. A lot of training that we do is regional. There's the Northeast Multi-Regional Training Institute that provides regional training. So officers from all the departments go to the training. You get the same type and theme and same content. And certainly we talk with our neighbors and with other departments in the region. We talk more with ones that we respect and we think are doing good things and progressive, and we share all the time. We really do. And we will not ever be proud, and we'll steal anyone's stuff that we think is better than ours.
And I have a question to to the idea of standardization. Is that sort of what the 8 Can't Wait initiative is getting at, trying to provide some standards or some uniformity among use of force policies across the nation? I mean, do you think, is that a fair characterization of it or no?
Well, I wouldn't want to speak for them, but I would certainly think that that is something they're trying to achieve.
Yeah,
Every
sure.
department has the same principles, right?
Yeah, yeah. What they have determined are best practices, trying to get those, you know, in policies across in law enforcement agencies across the country. Thanks. Okay. Yes, Karen.
Yeah, thank you, Anne. One last quick question, because I think Jerry just asked regarding the data that we received about arrests and conviction. I noticed all the arrest data, but is conviction, ultimate conviction in there too, or does that get tracked and I just missed it, or?
No, I misspoke. It's arrest data, it's not conviction data. We do have conviction data, but it's not in there.
Okay, I just want to make sure I didn't miss it.
Thank you, Karen. I'm glad you made that clarification. Brian, is that something that we could add or provide as supplemental information about convictions?
I don't think it will be very simple because the way our system tracks it, it's in like a free-form narrative field. It's not a checkbox, you know what I mean? And it's we have to grab it from the court computer system and put it into our system. So it would be a manual process, I think.
Okay, we'll talk about that. If we can, we will. If it's feasible, we will. So thanks, Karen. Oh, go ahead.
Can you remind me, the use of force policy, was that developed by the police department or by the commission?
It was developed by the Skokie Police Department.
Okay, thank you.
Other questions or comments? Again, the floor is open.
Mitch has a question.
You guys hear me?
Yes, we can hear you loud and clear. Thanks, Mitch.
Sorry, it's my first Zoom meeting. Anyway,
Great, you're doing
answer the
great.
question about the convictions. I could help out Chief Baker. Sometimes your convictions are up to 10 years down the line. So, I mean, we have cases that are sitting in the court system right now. It could be 2 years, 3 years, 5 years, 10 years. I've had one up to 7 years. So the thing is that the data that you make 10 arrests in this year, you may not find out for another 7 years on the convictions. So that's kind of hard. That's why the information is kind of juggled, because you don't know, you may not know for a long time.
Good point. Thanks, Mitch.
You're welcome.
Actually, yeah, that is a great point. One other thing too, I mean, would the conviction, that category of conviction, would that include guilty pleas or just conviction after a bench trial or a jury trial?
You're muted, Mitch.
Mitch, hold on. You're muted. We've got to unmute you. I'm looking for you here. Hold on. Come on.
Now?
Yes, you're good.
Okay. To answer your question, what happens is, I'm just talking from the law enforcement, not the attorney part. I'm sure Howard can answer that because he's an attorney. Well, what happened is that when we go to court, and whether they plead guilty or they're found guilty or they drop it, whatever, but the guilty is guilty in my opinion. So if they plead guilty or they're found guilty, it can still take up to 7 years.
Thanks, Mitch.
That would be my thought too.
Thank you.
Just based on logic without actually studying the issue. But yeah, it would seem to me that a settlement would be a guilty.
If I may, I would suspect, based on what I read about the court system and the court records, to try to dig out the information, would, even if it's 2, 3, 4 years down the line, would be just a monumental task. How we could track our arrests and their convictions.
Could well be. Good point, Paul.
Can I ask Chief Baker a question?
Please,
or
go ahead, Joe.
More of a comment. Chief Baker, I know the department's still accredited, Can you talk briefly about the accreditation process and use of force and everything else that goes into it with policies to give a better idea of the standards that the department has to attain?
I certainly can. We are a accredited department. We get our accreditation through the Illinois Association of Chiefs of Police. They are our accrediting body here in Illinois. Basically, accreditation is the Illinois Chiefs has a published manual of standards that they consider best practices from across the country that every progressive professional police department should meet those standards. They publish them. We're on a cycle where every 3 years, they will come in and do an assessment of our procedures and make sure that we have to show them proofs that we in fact do follow our policies and those policies meet their standards. And then after they do that inspection, they'll re-accredit us and then the cycle repeats. But the standards are always being improved upon. They're always being made better based on new and progressive tactics and techniques. And in those standards are standards that apply to the use of force. That answer what you were looking for, Joel?
Yeah, and I thought it was good for everyone to hear that. So they understand that it's just not the department coming up with these things, that there's actually an outside agency that helps and creates a bigger standard or a better standard.
Thanks, Joel. We have another comment that came in from YouTube. Ken Daniel asks, why can't Skokie lead nationally in developing use of force policies and reporting? Forget other townships. We're smart, motivated, thoughtful. We can get it done. Hear, hear. That's what this process is all about. So thanks, Ken Daniel, for that. Other comments, questions? I can't see if anyone else has any questions. I don't see any hands raised. So I'll again just open the floor last time for our guests, the community participants, Allison, Nancy, George, Jerry, Karen. Anything else you would like to ask the commission? And commissioners and staff, anything you would like to ask our community participants? Please feel free. Go ahead and just unmute yourselves if you'd like to speak. If you don't know how to unmute yourself, your microphone, it's at the bottom left of your screen.
I'm going to jump in again and just say, I really want to say how much I appreciate the commission for opening this up to the community and the department. I know in the last meeting, we asked a lot of questions and asked you guys to provide a lot of data, and that couldn't have been easy. And I'm sure it took a lot of time. So thank you for giving us this opportunity to be a part of this process and for everything you do for our community.
That's really appreciated, Nancy. Nice to hear. Anyone else?
Thank you all for participating, because it's an important part of the process.
Yeah, it's great to have so many community, well, everyone volunteers on this call except for staff. So thanks to all the volunteers, our commissioners and the community members. Mr. Chairman, I think if in the absence of any other comments or questions, this has been a good discussion. Thank you. This doesn't have to be the end. If something occurs to you after tonight's meeting, don't hesitate to reach out to me. We'll continue, as we have been over the last month, we'll continue to communicate with the entire group of community members that are participating in the use of force policy review. So thanks again, specifically to Nancy, Allison, George, Jerry, and Karen for taking the time to be here tonight. Mr. Chairman, I'll throw it back to you.
And I take it back. And as long as there's nothing else on the agenda, I do thank you and all the participants. I'm sure the commissioners all thank them. And